Well, I thank the senator from New Jersey. Thank you for your kind words. And I would just say the country is so grateful for what you are doing right now, because so many people are so frightened, worried, scared, and angry about what is happening to the basic values of this country that so many people have just thought would be there. That their kids would be able to go to school and get an education and not have to worry that the Department of Education was going to be gone and there wasn't a watchdog anymore or somebody to help them. Or that the research at NIH was going to be dismantled. Perhaps they had a family member who was in the middle of some kind of scientific experiment that is now being dismantled. What happens to their hope? I hear from people on so many topics, seniors who are waiting on hold for hours and then getting hung up on because there's nobody to answer the phone anymore. These are basic values that we have as a country, that we care for other human beings and we're there as a country for them. And you are showing that fight today and inspiring so many people. And I will ask you a question in a minute, but I want to personally thank you for what you are doing today. It is so important. You are the voice of so many people today, and I so appreciate it. Now, I want to change the dynamic a little bit. I wanted to come today. You have talked about the impact in so many areas in our country, but I wanted to come and ask you about something really personal to me, and that is the impact on our veterans today. The senator may not know this, but when I came to the Senate many years ago, I asked to be on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I was the first woman ever to ask to be on the Veterans Committee. And the reason for me was very personal. As you may know, my dad was a World War II veteran, and my family relied on his VA care when he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. But I also, when I was in college during the Vietnam War, many of my friends and colleagues were on the streets demonstrating, and my heart was out to them, but I was thinking about those men and women my age who were going over to Vietnam and coming back and injured in many different ways. So I actually did my college internship. I asked to be at the Seattle VA. And I went to the Seattle VA during the Vietnam War and served on what was the psychiatric ward at the time. And I sat and worked with young men and women who were my age, in college age, who'd been sent there and came back with severe mental health impacts. Now today we call that PTSD, but at the time we didn't know it. And I was looking at these men and women who volunteered to go over, or sometimes their number came up at the time, and came home and were going to be impacted the rest of their lives. And I learned firsthand what it means when somebody says, I will go for my country to fight for all of you, so that you have that America that you've been talking about here for you when you get home. And our promise to each and every one of them was, if you serve your country in the military, we will take care of you when you get home. That is a promise I hold near and dear to my heart, which is why I asked to be on the Veterans Committee when I first came here, first woman ever. And I will tell you, I've seen the impact time and time again. I go home and I hold town halls when I was newly here, and there'd be a lot of veterans who'd come and talk to me and tell me what's going on, what needed to be fixed. But always at that time, I will share with my colleagues, women never said anything. There were a few always in the back of the room, and it wasn't until the regular meeting was over and they'd come up quietly to me and say, I need to tell you what's happening to women veterans. I need to share with you sexual assault. I need to share with you that there's not the facilities. I go to the VA, and it's a men's only kind of place. There's no OBGYNs. There's nobody to do mammographies. And I often don't feel comfortable sitting in that waiting room with a whole lot of people after I have had the experiences that I've had, and there's no place for women to go. So we've worked really hard to make sure the VA works for women. We've worked really hard to make sure the VA addresses the issues of today. The PACT Act that we worked so hard to make sure that men and women who were victims of a toxic exposure overseas got the services they need. I could speak for 2 hours here about all the things we've done. But then I see what this administration is doing to those men and women who we asked as a country to serve overseas or to here at home, in service of all of us and the promises we've made them. And I think, what are they doing? They're undermining the very value that all of us have given to Americans who serve above and beyond. So when I hear of 2,000 layoffs a few weeks ago, I go, wow, where's that coming from? Well, I know because I'm getting the phone calls, like I'm sure you are, from a VA researcher who has been taken off the job, fired, unexplained, told he wasn't doing a good enough job somehow, doing research on basic things like prosthetics, or doing basic research on PTSD, or doing basic research on the kinds of things that our men and women who serve overseas are subjected to and need to come home and have the specialized service and resources that they need. Or I hear from veterans who can't get the services that they've been asked for. So now when we are hearing this administration is about to cut 80,000, you didn't hear me wrong, 80,000 more people from the VA, a vast majority themselves are veterans. I wanted to ask the senator, how does that hit you? How do you feel about that?
I'm so grateful you brought this up. And especially all the work we had to do when I got elected 12, 13 years ago. One of the earliest things I did is meet with women and veterans in my state and heard these awful stories about how long it took to get gynecological care, the waits that they had to do, the indignities they had to endure. And I'm glad we've made so many strides, in part thanks to your leadership in New Jersey, with special dedicated facilities to our women veterans, with shortening those wait times, with prioritizing them. But you're now right. Their proposal is to cut 83,000 positions from the VA. And you know this, you said it, this just years ago, this governing body passed the PACT Act with overwhelming bipartisan support. It was signed by President Biden in August of 2022, the largest health care and benefit expansion in VA history. You were one of the leaders, increasing disability compensation and extending eligibility for VA care. To meet this increased demand, the VA added 61,000 employees in 2023. These new hires included claim processors, physicians, nursing staffs, medical support assistants, food service workers, and housekeeping staff. And now the progress this body made is in jeopardy by this president. We added 61,000 just to keep up with the demands and the needs, and now he's cutting 83,000. This is an article, if you don't want me to yield. DAV urges Veteran Affairs to be more transparent about vet care amid layoffs and budget cuts. Veteran Affairs Secretary Doug Collins says veterans' care won't be impacted. We saw the largest expansion of VA healthcare benefits in a generation under the PACT Act. Collins attended DAV's recent midwinter conference where he came from behind the podium, walked into the audience, and told attendees that vet care and benefits would not be impacted by the Trump administration. In recent appearances on CBS Eye on Veterans podcast, DAV Communications Chief and Air Force veteran Dan Clare said the VA has not demonstrated how it's going to keep its promise. They have not demonstrated it. DAV also does not have a lot of information about what's planned, he said. Can you imagine that? Leaving all these veterans with insecurity and uncertainty. Now we're hearing about the 83,000 people losing their jobs. 20,000 or so folks might be veterans themselves. We're concerned about how we're going to be able to cut that many people and maintain care and benefits. The VA hired thousands of staffers since 2022 in response to the PACT Act, which brought 800,000 new enrollees into its systems. Collins has said cutting the VA workforce by 83,000 would bring it back down to its 2019 level before we did all those expansions to help women's vets. Clare said he has not heard about specific performance problems with those who've been laid off. Well, you haven't heard about it. Veterans' needs have not changed, and they remain great. The people who are sick from the burn pits didn't necessarily get better overnight, and some of these folks are going to have a long road to hoe when it comes to their health. DAV is getting calls frequently from veterans who are scared, angry, and don't understand what's going on and how it's going to affect them. Clare was one of the first whistleblowers on burn pits in Iraq, which eventually inspired the fight to pass the PACT Act to help veterans who became sick or even died from their toxic exposures. When we started talking about dioxin, when Vietnam veterans heard that, they immediately thought of Agent Orange. And that's probably what this is, our generation's Agent Orange. There's a lot of decisions being made behind closed doors, he continued. We want to know what the plan is. We want to know what the plan is. We're not against efficiency of government. We're not against even removing VA employees who may not be fit performers. A veteran has a unique understanding of another veteran's needs, Claire continued. When you lose those folks out of the VA, the veterans, you lose an institutional capacity to understand veterans. It is also unclear how these cuts will impact VA research, which Claire also stressed has helped veterans deal with complex issues that are service-connected, such as traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress. In addition to being concerned about how recent budget cuts and staff reductions will impact veterans care and caregivers, Claire said DAV is also concerned about the impact on veteran-owned small businesses. DAV is asking veteran business owners whose contracts have been recently canceled or who have been fired from their VA jobs to reach out here. DAV is actively keeping a list of veterans negatively affected by the Trump administration's cuts and plans on fighting for them in the weeks and months to come. And those lists that they're keeping are getting longer and longer and longer of people affected by this. So to answer your question, it's absurd, it is offensive, it's ready, fire, aim. Tens of thousands of veterans laid off, veterans who do business and work in contracts ended. Why is this another group that the President of the United States is scaring? Frightened veterans, angry veterans. I'm hearing from them in my state. You know you're hearing them from yours. What's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan? They have no answer for us. All they're doing is cutting Social Security staff, undermining the delivery of those services, the cutting the VA services. And why, by the way? Is it creating efficiency or effectiveness? No. Is it to create savings? Because we got to create savings to give more of those tax cuts to billionaires like Elon Musk. It is not fair. It is not right. When we send people off into the most dangerous environments on the planet Earth and ask them to put their lives on the lines for us, the least we can do as a nation is not penny pinch on their backs of the service that they deserve.